All right, so our next talk, in line with the DevSecOps theme of the event, is we have John coming on to talk with us about simplifying infrastructure as code security. Now, before we bring John in, I'm going to give you a little bit of his background. So, John is the co-founder and CTO of Sizo. Hopefully, I'm pronouncing that right. Where he's responsible for the research and refinement of cloud-native security solutions, including contributing to open source projects and industry standards focused on zero trust, DevSecOps, and cloud security. He's also a SANS author for the SEC 540 Cloud Security and DevOps Automation courses, an IANS faculty member, recipient of the 2021 Startup Innovator of the Year Award, and active member of the CNCF Tag Security Group. He's also the founder of the Steel City InfoSec meetup, the PitSec collaboration space, and is a core organizer of B-Sides Pittsburgh. In his free time, he enjoys mountain biking, weightlifting, chess, and spending time with his family. Sounds like a really interesting dude. So why don't we bring him in, Brian?
Sounds good.
John, welcome to the show,
Welcome,
man.
John.
Thank you for being
Hey,
here.
thanks for having me. I didn't have to read all of that.
Hey, I'm not going to sell you short, okay? People need to know every detail about your life in order to get the full experience. You know, that's what we're all about here.
Okay, there we go. Okay, cool.
John, is the name of the company a play on CISO? Like,
Yeah, it's actually pronounced CISO. That's
CISO.
technically not how you pronounce it, but it's my company. I get to pronounce it how I like.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a play on CISO. It's also a Japanese term that means like neat, clean, and organized. So the idea is like complexity causes security issues. Keep it simple.
Yeah.
Love it. I apologize for completely butchering that, and I only now get it. As soon as I heard Brian say it, I was like, this makes perfect sense.
Yeah. No worries.
Well, yeah. So, John, what are you going to be talking about today? I mean, we know simplifying IaC security, but what in particular are you going to be teaching people?
Yeah, so I've done a lot of different rollouts of infrastructure as code using different tools, and I've made a lot of mistakes. So this talk is mostly about outlining those mistakes during the rollout, and then particularly the adding security into those more distributed, larger deployments. And we're going to focus on Terraform for a bit because that seems to be the most popular one. But I've seen Terraform deployments that have hundreds of different repos just internally for their Terraform code, and like how do you scale security out to that large without messing it all up and breaking developers' builds? So that's the idea.
Amazing. Well, hey, we're gonna pass the stage over to you, and looking forward to learning a bit more about IaC security. So take it away.
Yep, sounds good. Cool. Very cool. There we go. Hi. I need my little typing thing to work. I love this. Hi, everybody. My name is John Zeolla. Welcome to my talk on infrastructure as code security. So this is really great, and I think the timing is perfect coming right after Dulles. So I don't have to cover a lot of this background stuff, but just a quick primer to myself. I live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and like was mentioned, I work at this company called CISO, the co-founder and CTO, and we get mid-sized tech companies, that use cloud-native technologies, SOC 2, ISO 27001, FedRAMP, things like that, and in ways that don't frustrate your developers, hopefully. I teach some SANS classes. I do a conference. In fact, that's the mug that I'm drinking out of today. Security meetup, community, and I love doing open source things. So CNCF is where I spend most of my time, but I also do some work in the OpenSSF. All right. So we're going to kind of breeze through the background here because, like I said, that's already been covered in the prior talk. So what is infrastructure as code? It's managing and provisioning computer data with these machine readable definition files. And really, that's the key. These machine readable definition files, you could consider them code. You can call them configuration too. I won't be offended. But it's one of those two things. That's what we're talking about here. So what does that actually look like? So for the rest of this talk, we're going to focus on Terraform. And so here is a little bit of Terraform as an example. You can see we're making this generic AWS instance called server. We're making one of them, pretty straightforward. But what's really cool about infrastructure as code is you can use it to build one thing, and then you can use very small changes to that to make hundreds of a thing, right? So now we've got 100 of these servers instead of just one, just by changing that number from a 1 to a 100. Very awesome. But now we need to think about security, right? And so if you think about security here, what is that AMI? You don't really know. What is in that AMI? Is it vulnerable? Has it been patched, etc.? So we need to know as a centralized security team, maybe what is in this infrastructure as code that all of these distributed teams are deploying. So that's a quick introduction, but here's your infrastructure as code. It's rotten to the core. I love this. There was a report done by Sneak in 2021 that talked about infrastructure as code, and they described how 63% of companies reported that they're just starting out. 7% of companies are implementing the current best practices, meaning 93% of companies are reporting themselves as not doing that. And 41% of these respondents said that the barrier was unclear benchmarks for security. And this is something that really frustrates me. Like, as someone who spends a lot of time developing, I can appreciate as a developer, like, how do I know this is secure or not? That's really maybe not my domain if I was a developer. And it's our job, I think, as the security teams to clearly inform development teams on what's okay and what's not okay. And if we can't automate that and distribute it into their pipelines and make it easy for them to understand good or not good, that's kind of our fault as a security team and not necessarily the developers for writing insecure code. So that's something I like to kind of bring onto ourselves. But it's all right. We're all in this together. We are going to try to work on a solution here. So just another quick primer specific to Terraform. There's a couple of phases of maturity that environments often go through when they're implementing Terraform as their infrastructure as code tool of choice. You'll start with this like all-in-one approach where you might have a repository, a couple repositories, and you get these really long Terraform the .tf files, and it will look a little something like this. This isn't long. In fact, this is fairly short, but you can imagine it would just keep going and keep going and keep going. Here we've got a Lightsail instance, and it is using a random name from this block down here. Everything is in this block to make that server. All you need to do is pass in a couple of variables, right? And make sure that you have this script. Pretty straightforward. So that's how infrastructure code will typically start. But then as you mature, you'll start to use these things called local modules. A local module might mean that you have a file which is up top, which is really just pointing to code somewhere else. And then you've actually got that code that's somewhere else, right? So you're going to point to it, pass your variables, and now you've got a little bit of a decoupling, but it's only file-based. So you can see here, we're pointing to the modules directory in the same folder structure, Git repository. So that's like the first step of decoupling. But really the panacea is these remote modules where you have a similar sort of approach. The only change here is that that source is actually another Git repository. And what's really special is that you can have this revision at the end. So you can use a commit hash or a tag or something along those lines, or a branch name. And you can version pin those. So this allows you to decouple. You can make changes to your module. And then this code block at the top, sometimes called a live, is decoupled. So your module can be changing a bunch, and then you can update your live to the latest module when it makes sense, especially if the module doesn't meet your needs, etc., for whatever reason. So you get to this point, you've now got a mature infrastructure as code Terraform-based stack. That's awesome. And now you want to implement security scanning. So, all right, so how do we start from here? Well, you might go on the internet, you might find a tool. Kix is the one that I'm going to be using in this example. It's from Checkmarks. I think it's a pretty good tool. It does infrastructure as code scanning. And so you'll have to change directory into, the right folder that has the Terraform. You want to run a Terraform init first because you need to pull in all your providers and your dependencies. Then you run your Kix scan. Okay, great. But we've got more than one environment. So now we're going to change into the environment to directory and do the same thing. We're getting a little fed up with that. So now we're going to put it all in one big line, cd and init and scan. Okay, great. And if you're like me, you'll keep getting fed up running the same commands over and over, and you'll start making monstrosities like this. So now you're trying to like automatically detect where the Terraform is using a find command, using push D to jump into that right place, run those couple commands, and then pop D to jump out of it. You're also now outputting results into a certain directory so you could look at it later. All right, we're getting better, but there's still lots of issues here. So we've done this. We ran this big one-liner, and we've got 100 repositories of Terraform, and we get our results. So we start taking a look at the results, And, if you're anything like me, when you look at these numbers, you give it a little something like that. So 12,000 findings, 2,500 highs. And this is actually a real result from from one of my clients where I ran security scans. This is one of their repositories of which they had hundreds. 1,200 findings. Okay, that's great. So what do we even do now? Like, how do you even start? Like, okay, you can start at the highs, but there's 2,585 of them. All right, we've got to do something about this. And then you start to dig even further, and you might even find out something like this. So in the checkmarks kicks documentation, they say that they don't support custom modules at all. So this mature approach, that if you've read the book Terraform Up and Running, they recommend having this sort of a design. Well, this is explicitly not supported by Kix, but it's not on their readme.md. You have to go under docs, platforms MD, go to Terraform modules and find this one line in there that was actually added because I asked them to add it because they didn't support this, right? So, all right, great. We've done all this work. We have all these findings, and Kix doesn't even support our deployment mechanism. Well, that's not great. So we've made a mistake, right? And that happens to all of us. I'm hoping that everybody here can learn from my mistakes. I've made these many, many, many times. And so you can look at a repository like this IaC security tool compare. I love this repository. Just kind of outlines the different options that you have to do security scanning against different infrastructure as code environments. You can see Kix is on here, but so are lots of others. Sneak is a great tool, Terrascan. My favorite of these is actually Checkoff for most scenarios, but CloudRail has its own uses. All of these have their own niche, but Checkoff is my generic favorite. So I encountered all of these different tools. I ran into lots of issues deploying them, detecting files, and then you need to manage whether or not you fail the build or not, right? We don't want to make our developers angry. We maybe even want them to be able to disable security for a time period, but still gather information. There's all these things that we might want to do. And if you've got this in hundreds of different repositories, now you've got to manage all those different repositories. You want to centralize things, right? So I made this tool called EasyInfra, short for Easy Infrastructure as Code. And the idea is that I would just make a Docker container, open it up on the internet, employ a lot of these tactics inside the container, and allow you to just like flip them on and off. So here's a deployment example with Jenkins, but this is very similar for if you're using like GitLab with GitLab runners or GitHub Actions or Bitbucket pipes. It's all very similar ideas. But with this Jenkins CI example, I think it's really nice to see, like on the left is before, probably what you're doing before implementing EasyInfra, and the right is after. And if you look closely enough, you'll see that only one line has changed. And that's the environment in which the commands are being run. So this terraform init, validate, apply, those are just happening inside of this container instead of this one. And magically, the security stuff is just happening. Like that's the main benefit that EasyInfra brings. All you have to do is run Terraform in the EasyInfra Terraform container, and you get Terraform security. If you run Ansible in the EasyInfra Ansible container, you get Ansible security, etc. Right? It's completely transparent. And there's a whole bunch of different features. I don't have a ton of time to go through all of them, but there's a learning mode feature. So you can find out if it would have failed the build, but don't actually fail the build. Bring that telemetry locally and evaluate it. They have centralized logging, and it supports 38 different destinations. So everything that you can expect from your Splunks and Elk Stacks to syslog, CloudWatch, S3 buckets, whatever, it's all supported. It has an arbitrary hooking framework. So say what EasyInfra is doing isn't what you want to do. You can install a hook and do whatever you want to do. You can bring your own binaries. You can bring your own bash scripts, and it will hook the Terraform commands or Ansible commands, etc., and run what you tell it to do. So you need to provide some sort of custom telemetry. Your repositories are special in some way, and you need to do something a little different. That's all built in, and a bunch of other stuff too, right? And just because I don't have time for a full demo, I could do a demo if everyone would allow me. But this is what just a quick Grafana dashboard and a Loki environment setup would look like. So you can see here, we've got all of the times that EasyInfra had security turned off but ran. So this allows you to deploy EasyInfra and make sure that basic things are operating the right Terraform versions are being detected. So the cool thing is it actually auto detects the right version of Terraform that the code requires, switches to that version on the fly, and then uses it for your commands. So you don't have to hard code any sort of versions. You can put it in the code as the Terraform required version. So you want to make sure that that sort of stuff works, and it'll centralize logs even when the security scans are turned off. So now you know when your security is turned off, and that information is just really good. But then there's other basic things you can know when it runs but found no issues. That's a good thing. When it ran and found an issue but didn't fail the build, so it was suppressed. It would have failed the build in the future if you turn blocking mode on, but it's in that audit mode. So don't fail the build. And then down here is, when are you actually failing the build? How bad is your environment getting blocked or stopped or slowed down, etc. And then at the bottom, we've got our raw logs. So like I said, I do have a demo set up, but I think I'm pretty much at time here. So yeah, let me know. Should I go forward with a demo, or do we have some questions?
I know we do have one question that came up in the middle of that, but I don't think we'll have time for the demo, just to keep things succinct here. But I appreciate you offering to do that, John, and that would be fun to see maybe in a future session. So I know really quick, Randall was here to introduce you, but knowing that you were talking about containers there, and that's like a buzzword, you say that like 3 times, that brings up our buddy Eric, and so we kicked Randall out, and we're now bringing on Eric to help talk about this stuff too. So everybody say hi to Eric real quick.
Hi, Eric.
What's up, Eric?
What's up, Eric?
I
Welcome
can learn
in.
to unmute myself like normal. Hey, everybody.
Yes. So the one question we had was, and we believe it still applies to infrastructure as code comments and discussion around there, was if you had any suggestions on tools for other types of infrastructure as code, like, for example, CloudFormation, CDK for AWS, things like that.
Yeah, so a lot of the tools that I was talking about have support for multiple infrastructure as code systems. So like Checkov supports Helm and things like that. Sneak, I believe, supports a bunch. Kix definitely supports a bunch. In fact, if you go to like the Checkov repository and you just scroll down a little bit, oh, maybe it's not in here. They do have a whole list of logos and things like that they support. Here it's a little bit better. It doesn't work great on the dark mode, but Terraform, Kubernetes, gRPC, Crossplane, Pulumini, all this stuff. So these vendors are support multiple different deployment mechanisms. And then in IaC-Infra, I actually just did a huge refactor, and I'm going to be supporting that in IaC-Infra too. So CloudFormation is high on the list, Crossplane, etc.
Nice, thank you for that. Eric, Micah, any questions for John? I'll check the chat at the same time as well.
Nothing here. I was able to come back just after you started, so it was a great presentation. Thanks a lot, John.
Awesome.
Yeah, for sure. Excellent stuff. I don't see any questions in the chat, but I guess one more thing for you, John. If folks want to get in touch with you, ask you more questions about this stuff afterwards, where's the best place to find you?
Yeah, so the project I was talking about is available on GitHub, CISO/IaC-Infra. Yep, there we go. And then if you want to reach out to me, you can hit me up on LinkedIn. It's just my name, John Zeolla.
Awesome. Great stuff. Well, thank you so much, John.
Yeah.
Appreciate you coming on here and chatting with us about that and teaching us about simplifying IaC. We'll see you around, bud.
Thanks for having me. Yep. Talk to you later. See ya.
Bye.